some analysis and unpacking some of the key issues as far as Budget 2021 goes. And we're joined on the line this morning by Kevin Lings, Chief Economist at Stanlib. Kevin, good morning to you. Welcome to the show.
Hi, good morning. Hope you're doing well.
Yes, very well, thanks, and hope you are too.
Yeah, not too bad. The budget, I think, was a bit better, so that helped.
Yes, I don't know. Did this come as a surprise to you, Kevin?
It did. I think there were a couple of areas that I thought stood out. The fact that there weren't any significant tax increases, that definitely helped. I think going into the budget, there was a lot of concern, obviously, that because government finances in terms of tax revenue had fallen well behind budget, that the minister would be looking to recoup some of that lost revenue through tax hikes. And clearly that didn't happen. So I think that was a very good outcome. The second, I thought, was the fact that the minister is saying that salary adjustments are going to have to be curtailed over the next couple of years. Obviously, we have to wait and see what happens with the actual wage negotiation. But on the face of it, the minister is clearly determined to maintain fiscal discipline going forward. I thought that was a good outcome. And then the third factor was the fact that the government is now reducing their borrowing requirement, actually quite substantially for the coming year. So I thought a couple of factors that probably net were a surprise to the upside. But obviously there's risk with all of these factors. There are risks. There's implementation risk. There's the risk, take for instance, the salary adjustment. There's the risk that it results in a huge public sector strike. There's the risk that government can't really adhere to that type of discipline, or that by curtailing people's salaries, you actually are hurting economic activity. And if you don't compensate somewhere else, then you can peg back economic growth. So there are a number of risks with the budget, but on the face of it, I thought it was a better outcome than perhaps most people expected.
Yes. Now, also, Kevin, when one looks at this budget speech, it obviously comes at a critical time. It comes at the tail end of this second wave of the COVID-19 infections. And also at the same time, we know that many job losses obviously had taken place during the last year as with regard to the pandemic. And I think many of us obviously were quite interested to see how the government obviously will be looking at the pandemic in itself. And one thing that was encouraging to note was government saying that Treasury will bankroll the COVID-19 vaccination program without relying on tax increases.
Yeah, I think that's very good news. So they've included that now fully in the budget. Directly the government saying they're going to allocate 10.2 billion to the vaccine over the next 2 years. And it does look like there is some additional funds that can be utilized if that 10.3 billion is not enough. So I think that's good news in the sense that it does suggest that we can at least afford the vaccines. The question remains, are we going to get enough vaccines quick enough to start to make a difference during the course of this year? But in terms of budgeting for it, I thought that was welcome. Where I thought that the government could have done a lot more is, how are we going to get employment back from all of the job losses we've incurred. So I was looking at the labor market, and over the last 2 years, so this is including before COVID-19, we've lost 1.5 million jobs. Obviously, a lot of those jobs were last year, but there were job losses prior to that. So, the tax base, if you like, is down 1.5 million in 2 years. And so we need to urgently lift economic growth, create jobs, and try and get that tax base reestablished. Otherwise, government finances is going to remain under significant pressure. And I just felt there wasn't enough that focused on that element within the budget. But yes, the procurement of vaccines, at least from a financial perspective seems to be accounted for now.
Yes. Now, I think one major cause of concern is the minimal increases to social grants. And especially at a time like this where we know that, he's basically allocated very little as far as social grants are concerned, and millions right across the country are reliant on social grants.
That's right. So that element of the budget has actually been scaled back a fair bit. Obviously, at the moment, a lot of people receive social grants, but the minister's clearly saying that in terms of further increases, it's going to be constrained. And it leaves South Africa with a major dilemma, and the dilemma is the unemployment rate keeps rising. And obviously, we're not in a position to provide an adequate social safety net. So the answer can't be that we simply allocate more and more money to social grants, because we don't have the tax base to do that. I think the answer longer term has to be, how do we create jobs? How do we get people who are on social grants employed, and therefore less of a burden on the state? And as I say, I don't know that enough is being done. So you're going to find, if you think about what the budget is saying, is that public sector wages are going to be curtailed over the next couple of years. Social grant payments are going to be curtailed. So that element of society is going to be under financial pressure. There's no doubt about that. And yes, you can argue that the finances are not available, but what are we doing to lift the growth rate? What are we doing to then ensure that there are employment opportunities? And to me, that element is missing within the budget to compensate society for the discipline you're trying to implement.
Now, just talking about the discipline you're trying to implement. Now, one of the points that he had made, Kevin, is he said, forget tax hikes, hire the right people to improve collections. Now, that is going to be a major area of focus in terms of collecting money. But on the other side, on the flip side as well, do we have the right people to spend that money as well? Considering, the abuse that has taken place, the corruption over a period of time. It's fine having a collection system, and collecting all this revenue. And at the end of the day, when it comes to spending that money again, it raises huge question marks.
That's right. So if you ignore the corruption element, the degree of wasteful expenditure has been enormous in South Africa in recent years. And so we find ourselves in this position because of that, because we haven't utilized the tax base effectively. And if we diverted a lot of that money into infrastructure, into the provision of energy, water, roads, port infrastructure, we would have made a huge difference to the performance of this economy. So there's no doubt that we've squandered a huge opportunity. And I agree with you. We can't simply say, well, give the government more money, let's collect more money, but we're not going to do well with the allocation of that money or the spending of that money. And so I guess we keep looking at the budget, hoping that there will be more effort to improve wasteful expenditure. And I think at the margin, it is moving in the right direction, but it's not there. If you look at various municipality finances, I think they're in shocking state. If I look at various government departments and their ability to deliver an effective service, it's nowhere near what is required. So there's no doubt that we continue to be ineffective in how we spend the money. And certainly we've got to look at the productivity of government. And that has to be linked back, I think, to salaries and the payment of government workers. We've got to find a way to link those two and effectively demand that if salaries do go up, that government is more efficient in how it delivers services. So I think it's an area that government has a lot of work to do. There's also, to be fair, I guess, over the last, let's say, 5 to 10 years, there has been a depletion of institutional capacity, essentially for political reasons or the Zuma administration, and it takes a considerable length of time to restore that institutional capacity within each government department. So I think we've got to acknowledge that a lot of damage has been done to government over the last 10 years, and it's going to take time to rectify that.
Well, Kevin, thank you very much for that and for your time with us this morning, the analysis that you bring this morning to the budget speech. We wish you well. All the best to you.
Thanks a lot. Only a pleasure. And I think in the end, at least better than we thought.
Kevin Lings, Chief Economist at Stanlib, with us this morning.
Penny Appeal's Education First campaign helps children to get access to quality education.
I'm 14 years old. When I grow up, I'd like to be a scientist.
We believe every child belongs at school,
And we want education, a better education.
learning and dreaming their way to a better future. With your help, we can provide classrooms, desks, stationery packs, and school shoes. Help make these dreams a reality. Visit www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031